And I think what the movement factor for me is that pantheism is a vessel of constant change. There is nothing that exists exactly as it is in the next half a trillionth of a millisecond next. It is constant change, constant transformation. And so God is not a static thing, right? It is constantly transforming. Transformation can be found in death, sure, birth, yes. But it's also found in like the loss of a job. It's found in like moving to a new place. It's found in like a flower growing for the first time or blooming, right? Or decaying, right? This whole life cycle process, the constant cycle movement and change of society as well, shows that it's possible that change can happen.
Hello and welcome to the Deadbeat Philosophy Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Baumeister, and with me today is a very good friend of a fellow traveler in the realm of forming new paths for community and for thought, Tasha Brownfield. Tasha, how are you doing today?
Things are doing good. End of the work day, so I've been working all day and happy to be here.
Why don't we start with that? Like, where are you geographically, phenomenologically, and then like, who are you in that space? And introduce yourself to us. Yeah,
absolutely. It's, like I said, great to be here. I am tuned in from Baltimore, Maryland, from the Johns Hopkins Hospital and Seton Hill Cancer Center in my office. My office is located in a place for cancer patients and their caregivers to stay while receiving treatment. My role here is the outpatient oncology chaplain for the Johns Hopkins Hospital. So I'm at like 3 different locations around the Baltimore area, serving our outpatient cancer folks.
Wonderful. Define your role there. Like you live in a building where people who are receiving cancer treatment, the building's kind of designed to serve those patients and their families. And then you're also there. Like what is it that you contribute, or what is your relationship with the rest of the humans and other kind of creatures that live there?
Yeah, this role is newer. So it's a lot of more pioneering and entrepreneurship of what does this role and like assessing where are the needs with the community, and like then how do you then address your assessments, right? So in this place, a lot of people have like inpatient / outpatient treatments. So they have like daily treatments for especially bone marrow transplants in folks. So I see them when they're getting treatments, but they also like come home here. People can live here up to like 9 months, I think was the longest people I've known. So they come from all around the world and they come here. So it's a larger international pool of people, people that have lower income as well that need that support. It's a lot cheaper here to go through kind of like Hopkins affiliated housing for the duration of their treatment. So currently what I'm doing with this particular community is that I offer like weekly slots with the chaplain. So some of it's like mindfulness techniques or other ways to like center yourself, especially amongst pain. So I use different clinical research studies that have been used to say like, okay, how can we actually like reduce inflammation in the body, right? Like how can these different things happen to actually improve success rates? So I do a lot of research and reading in my role and trying to implement that care in the work that's been done into the community. So weekly right now, I'm leading meditation time with the chaplain, kind of doing whatever is needed, whatever I assess in the moment. And otherwise, I'm at different outpatient sites meeting people when they first get diagnosed. So I go to the thoracic multidisciplinary clinic. I meet every new thoracic cancer patient, which is lung and esophageal cancer, that comes into Hopkins, but people come in from all around the world. So it's both a local hospital for the Baltimore community and a worldwide renowned hospital. So
what does that mean for you, and how would you define your chaplaincy? And maybe built into that, some people might be curious who are listening, like, how do you define yourself in terms of like your denomination? It's like, where can people in the sense of where do people place you on their, like flow chart of religions or whatnot, or faiths? And, if you want to, or what do you even think about that chart?
Yeah, it's definitely a very niche profession that there's not a whole lot of us, right? Especially in healthcare chaplaincy. So I'm like the youngest possible chaplain you could be if you didn't like skip grades as well. So I'm 27. So it has been going through fast track in a way, and I have landed a full-time chaplain job at 27, which is a strange thing to do, where most of my colleagues are at least double my age. So it feels like a blessing that I'm here and that I kind of found this niche as quickly as I have. So, in some of my training, kind of what defines chaplaincy for me is I've had a total of 9 years of schooling, including undergrad, to be a chaplain. So a lot of training, right? So I went to undergrad for 4 years at Seton Hill University. Then I got my master's at Yale Divinity School, which was a 3-year program, while doing another a part-time internship for 2 years in New York City at a Unitarian Universalist Congregation. That's who has endorsed me. The Unitarian Universalist Society of Community Ministers endorses me nationally for me to work towards board certification for chaplaincy. Then this last year, from 2023 to 2024, I was in chaplain residency training, which was at the Johns Hopkins Hospital here. So when I was getting trained here, I was kind of in charge of labor and delivery in the neonatal ICU and some inpatient oncology floors. So I took care, and then we also had the pager, which is like a literal literal pager. And we respond to all emergent needs. So at Hopkins, it's a very unique that the chaplain is actually on the code team. So when someone stops breathing, passes out, we're one of the runners. So I'll be doing that tomorrow night, overnight.
Oh, wow.
So anyone
that means if somebody's in mortal danger, you got to be there. Like that's like a chaplain. There's always a chaplain on call at all times to kind of appear in these like potentially end of life moments, right? And
correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're all interfaith trained, so we're here to kind of support any faith that is brought before us or lack thereof. Yeah. I always say I have on my cards because people think chaplain and they think like Christian religion, right? But I make sure to put I'm here for religious, spiritual, existential support. When you're facing death, cancer diagnosis, right? Like you're facing these really hard, huge questions that face your mortality, right there. So, I mean, the chaplain is that kind of role to be and sit with that uncomfortability because there's nothing you can fix about it, right? And I think that's why I love the role of the chaplain is that it's not one that we can fix it. I can't bring you back to life. I don't have that ability. I can't fix the woes that you're having, but I can sit with you exactly as you are, as angry as you are, as scared as you are. And I don't have to change anything, but keep showing up. And to be sometimes provide ritual if that's needed, right? So, but we're there kind of for everyone, which has been such a blessing, especially in pediatrics for me, and in oncology as well. But I don't think I would have thought when I was in undergrad, for example, that I would have seen as many children die live as I have now at my age. I don't know if I would ever have thought that, but and I was surprised of how well I dealt with it, I guess, as well.
Okay. How many children have you seen die? I mean, maybe that's a morbid question. Or just give us a ballpark. It's like this is it. Yeah.
How many children that I've known have died is probably close to 100. But how many that I've seen live, I would put maybe towards 40 to 60. Some were in the trauma bay after being shot. Some were in car accidents. Some had cancer. Some had this, right? Some were, in labor and delivery. I was helping baptize the remains of the fetus that was miscarried, right? So it's also holding those children who never got to be as well, providing prayer and comfort and photos and blessings and everything that I could for them as well. So if you also count miscarriages as well, I mean, that's absolutely a type of loss, so a lot of child loss and a lot of adult loss as well. But I found a lot of meaning in it, and it doesn't drain me, and it doesn't push me to something that I'm uncomfortable with, which is strange. And I think instead it brings right here, something I can't ignore, the reality of death and truth where it actually grounds me and centers me, especially in like the rest of the life and me out in the world, experiencing everything that I can. It makes me have a deeper appreciation because mortality is like right here. So it's given me strength. It's giving me hope to be with people in the face of death, rather than the opposite of or despair.
Okay.
So that's kind of how I define chaplaincy, or kind of what my role is. And right now I'm only an outpatient, and I cover the inpatient side as needed for coverage, like tomorrow. But otherwise, my role now is to be with people when they first get diagnosed and be with them on their journey through. So it's a lot more long-term care than short-term acute. So, you know, I could maybe be with people for years, and then maybe they do die in 2 years, right? Because there's no life-saving treatment. There's only life-extending treatments, you know, so how I'm with them on that journey and decision-making, which is also a blessing, that I am able to be here in this full-time role.
Man. So that's, yeah, you know, that's like an intense existence, and that's a really cool, and I think a noble existence, what you do. And I think most people, wherever they come from, could see the value of what you do. So let me, I have like two follow-ups to this that I think people would maybe be interested to hear about. And so one involves like the more theoretical, abstract territory of the philosophy in the background for you there, and also maybe Unitarian Universalism and defining that. And another one is more practical and like the hands-on nature of it. And why don't we, like, my question involves both of those. So why don't you just start with the intellectual and then transition yourself to the practical, or start with the practical and transition yourself to the intellectual?
Yeah, great questions. So I'll maybe start in the middle. We'll see where I wander here. So another role that I have is I'm the senior minister at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Smithton, Pennsylvania. So it is we're a small congregation. It's actually my home congregation that I went to when I was 17. They ordained and installed me on March 23rd this past year, March 23rd, 2025.
Congratulations.
So I now am a senior minister as well as a reverend officially as of March, which is wild. But that's kind of the other role that I have.
And that's like a title that you can put, like, if you book an airline ticket, that can be like printed on there or something. That's like a pretty official type of thing. You know what I mean? Right. Yeah. So you can't just go around saying that you're a reverend, right? Yeah. And I'll just say, to add, like, for people who may, know me a bit, who are listening to this, it's that I also have Unitarian Universalism in my family background and attended UU services during certain parts of my childhood. And then in my dad's family, there's also long history of that in Southern California and things. And so it was unique for me to meet Tasha. So we met at Seton Hill University, where Tasha did her bachelor's. And that's the spot where I was assistant professor for 4 years of philosophy. And so we overlapped in this space, but it's a small Catholic liberal arts school. And we were in some ways kind of odd fish out, a little bit. I think we both fit the place, well in our own ways and things, but it was interesting to be at this space and to meet Tasha, and also to connect with this UU aspect and to see how it has influenced their experience in a very formative and really cool way.
Yeah. It would definitely odd fish out. And I also am an adjunct professor now at Seton Hill University for a religious studies department.
Look at that.
Crazy. 27, okay. Man, I got a lot happening, which is lovely. But definitely I didn't have the normative philosophical theological beliefs. Even within Unitarian Universalism, a little bit on the outskirts. It's the only federally recognized religion for me to be able to do the work that I'm doing that would accept who I am as a pantheist. That's kind of the philosophical model going on in the background for me. Unitarian Universalism is absolutely my home. They are have endorsed me, and that's the way that I found my path was through this little small congregation in Smithton. When I did travels with Semester at Sea or other abroad programs with Seton Hill on scholarship, they said, well, you're studying religion and you're traveling. Tell us what you know. So I started preaching at 19 at Smithton, and they have since hired me as their senior minister. So within under 10 years. But it was then that set me on a path.
And they kind of gave you a chance and nurtured you, it seems. They kind of, like, you were able to be yourself. Like Immanuel Kant would say, every human has to develop all their capacities. There's like a certain natural, and so that was, if they flourish and if you're happy, you're in a space where you can develop them. And so that seems like that was an environment where you were able to grow in these ways. And that's very fortunate that you had that, and that they had you and have you. I mean, that's cool.
Yeah, it's such a blessing to have found that, because I started in Pittsburgh at the Seton Hill congregation, and I went on a random Sunday because my best friend from childhood was talking about pantheism on the band bus when I first heard this word when I was 15. And he said, "Oh, we had a sermon about that like a couple weeks ago." I said, "What church do you go to?" Because this was like subversive. I've never even heard of the word. And eventually, when I had a car, I drove up to Pittsburgh, the hour drive, and it was their coming of age ceremony, which in the UU tradition is when 8th graders will be exposed to every type of religion in the area possible. So like they'll go to mosques, synagogues, every type of Christian church, they'll coven hop, right? They'll kind of go all these different places. And then they give a presentation saying, "This is where I found God," or "This is what I think God is or found to be." A kid went up and said that he was an atheist, and everyone clapped. Someone said they found God in a praying mantis, and everyone clapped. And then another person came up and said, "I found like God in family," and everyone like celebrated. And I was like, where was this place my whole life? I said, I wish I had a place that I could question and be free to push back and explore. And then when I was driving in my small little town near Smithton to work at an animal sanctuary I was at for a long time, I saw like a rusted chalice flame, like the Unitarian Universalist flame. And I was like, 0.3 miles to where? I was like, we're in a Rust Belt, Old Stoney's Brewery beer factory that's closed down. And I said it was 0.3 miles away. And I said, in Smithton, in this small little town, where do you mean? So then I started going there. And they were lay-led, so there wasn't a minister when I joined. You don't need a minister to have a congregation. So
Sure.
That's why I started preaching.
Great. But now they do have a minister, right? I mean, you're the minister.
I'm the minister now.
Okay. So you hold services so you live in Baltimore right now, but you commute to Smithton as needed as well. Is that right? Or?
Yeah, I preach there at least once a month. But I live 50-50 between Baltimore and Pittsburgh. My family partner, everyone's up there. So I commute every single weekend home. Nice. While I'm doing this job here. So lots of traveling, lots of car time for me, for sure.
Yeah. But that can be good time, those commutes, if it's not, I don't know if you drive at like agonizing periods in terms of traffic, or if maybe you avoid the worst of it. I don't know.
I attempt to avoid the worst of it, but it's not too bad between here and Pittsburgh. 4 hours.
Yeah. Mountains. So do you listen to podcasts or music or meditate? Like, what do you do with that time, that like unique time where if you're driving, your eyes are on the road, but your mind can focus on something? So like, what do you do in that space? Talk to people? I don't know.
Yeah. Talk to people. I'll like catch up on phone calls, like keeping in touch with friends since I'm all over the place. That's a great time for that. I listen to a lot of audiobooks, podcasts, YouTube videos, educational videos, something that's working my mind. I'll like talk to my phone, like talk to text, and like think about sermons and like write while I drive, like by talking to my phone. I listen to a lot of music. I love metal music and like folk music. So I listen to a lot of heavy metal in the car, driving between my jobs and chaplain places. And that's always very fun.
Nice. How loud? Yeah. How loud do you have the?
It can get up to max.
Okay. No hearing loss, huh? Yeah. Just
not yet. I'm young, so I don't know. Might be coming.
Okay, let's bounce from that. Pantheism then. So like we defined you and introduced that. You define yourself as pantheist. Like what does that mean for you? And maybe then in particular, however you define pantheism, do you also define yourself as a Spinozist, or would that be inaccurate?
I wouldn't say it's inaccurate, but it's not entirely accurate either. I mean, that's how I found pantheism, was primarily through Spinoza. Technically, it was through Richard Dawkins. That's how I was first introduced to it, as sexed up atheism, and as a I don't know how, as a 15-year-old, that intrigued me. As a sexed up atheism, I was looking at different branches of it, like atheism, because atheism didn't sit right with me. I found awe and wonder in the world, and Richard Dawkins told me about pantheism, and that led me to the World Pantheist Movement web pages that were on back then. That was years ago. And,
which Dawkins book in particular did you read, or do you recall?
It was an article. It was a weird, small article, and I have tried to find it since then to be like, this was like a turning point. I've not been able to find it. But it was like sexed up atheism, Richard Dawkins. It was like a critique on pantheism, I'm pretty sure. But I was like, that definition, like, that's me. Like, I remember seeing it, and I remember crying in my room because I just got internet in my hands. I wasn't born with the internet in my hands, but I was like a teenager that had Wi-Fi finally in the house. And when I saw it, I just cried because I was like, there's a word for this. Like, it resonated so deeply with me that I was like, this is my life now. Like, I like, and here I am. Like, I guess I did really make it my life. My calling. Yeah. It's definitely not been an easy road to be a pantheist in the institutions that I have been in. Seton Hill was great to me. But beyond that, it's been a journey for sure. That I wouldn't change for the world because it's brought me to today. I don't regret that. But I've been a steadfast pantheist, not necessarily Spinozist. I think I took a long time because I started reading Spinoza when I was 16, I think. And I think once right?
We would have been friends. We would have been friends. Like, I don't know if I was quite reading Spinoza when I was 16, but I would have been open to Spinoza. You know what I mean? It's like, it's nice to meet other people who get tipped onto that stuff at that early age. So
weird things that I did, but yeah. So I think Spinoza's work is great. So one of the books that was published in 2018, 2020 was Mary Jane Rubinstein's God, Worlds, and Monsters about the pantheologies. And it was like the first, literature review, like historical accounts of pantheism that was ever created. I remember I was like hunting for that when I was at Seton Hill. I was like, I want this. I was like, why doesn't it exist? Mary Jane Rubinstein, who's based out of Connecticut, I believe now, wrote it. And she focuses on Western pantheism. So, the pantheology is finding God in all, right? Or substance, everything being equally divine, exists in a lot of Eastern religions and Eastern cultures. But it's not like it hasn't existed in Western culture. So I think a part of my calling and my mission is, yes, I find reverence in Eastern religions, just how I do in Christianity, right? Or the Abrahamic traditions. I can find reverence or pieces there that I'm like, I can learn from or see myself in. But pantheism on the Western side has been burned literally. And the people have been burned for 2,000 years. So the accounts, the positive accounts of pantheism are gone. What Mary Jane Rubinstein talks about is this negative account. There's a pervasive thread throughout the last 2,000 years in Western thought that is oh, these crazy pantheists are on the loose. Yeah. They're like, the devils are here,
Yeah. Defined in different ways, with different masks, and for sure.
Witch trials to whatever, right? That kind of left-handed tradition of finding God within oneself and within everything. Right-handed being God somewhere else. If you're giving your power to something else, left-handed is it's within.
So for you, it seems like pantheism is something ancient. Is that the case? Do you see this as a fundamentally human perspective on the world that goes back as far as there have been humans, maybe even before? Or is pantheism something that emerges at one historical point?
I would say maybe a mix of both. And I think because the literature is so scarce that it's hard to tell. There's a lot of resonances throughout Western culture. The closest that we got to pantheism being accepted in the West, and accepted is a hard word, but was would be the transcendentalist, right? But in universalist, maybe, but not really even then. So, you know, so I think there's a lot of intellectual figures that would like hit upon it, but I'm trying to, I forget what dictionary it's published in, but it called pantheism the most absurd, demonstrative thing that you could ever possibly be. Like, it's an impossible thing to be in the world. And Mary Jane Rubenstein said, quoting Grace Jansen, who is a feminist theologian, who I think recently, in the last 20 years, I think has passed away. So she's a more current writer. They both said that, you know, there's a lot of people describing pantheism from this like intellectual view, especially now. There's a lot more work even since Seton Hill. There's been a whoosh since I've been tracking it very in detail since I was a kid. So now there's been a high resurgence in interest. I can see just in publishing. I don't have the specific names, but if you look it up, it's there. It's a lot more on Spinoza, a lot more on pantheism or the pantheologies, from intellectually within the philosophy discipline. But what Grace Jansen Rubenstein said, that was, there's no one that has taken up the banner saying like, I'm a pantheist and this is what this means. You know, they said to our knowledge, like there's not really those people out there yet. And the last person I was able to find that was like a practicing pantheist, like spiritual leader, minister, whatever you want to give it, civil servant pantheist, was Abner Neeland, who was the last religious blasphemer charged in the United States. Ralph Waldo Emerson was one of the people to help get them out of prison. So that was one of the people that inspired the Transcendentalist movement, was Abner Neeland. But he was an outspoken pantheist. He was like pro sex worker rights, pro kind of queer relationships, abolition of slavery. Like he would be progressive for today, right? So he was locked up and he was the last person charged with religious blasphemy. And I think it's interesting that we might be swinging back that way in the United States.
Yeah. You mean like under Trump, like pantheists being persecuted?
I can imagine. Yeah. Luckily, we aren't that. There's not like someone vocal out there screaming about pantheism. So not yet, but I can like just like the tones of white Christian nationalism, right? I think the more of a theocracy is trying to be established and maybe has societally kind of been there, but then like, so I can't imagine it's what would go well. But I am very grateful to be born in the time that I am, to be able to look the way I do and have the intersectionalities I have, and be able to be a pantheist and do all these things, or else I would have been burned, like even like probably 100 years ago. So. Yes.
Yeah, I think about that sometimes. And to the credit, I mean the church, Unitarian Universalism as an institution and as a home and as a space of nurturing, that's really to their credit that, you know, like to allow, you know, it requires some shelter. Like if you didn't have that institutional home, it would be far more difficult. I mean, you legally would not be able to pursue the profession that you have and such. So it's as a UU pantheist, it seems like a really natural fit, and that's I like that a lot. Let me I have two other questions then, and then maybe we can take a break, and I'll fold these two into one if that sounds good to you.
Love it.
And then just like take this dough and make your own pizza out of it. But so one, I want to ask you about like intersectionality and queerness and gender, and how that is connected with pantheism and maybe your politics and also your practical work, to like how that all fits together. And then another one is maybe just like put yourself in the shoes of someone who's just like encountering the idea of pantheism for the first time mentally, and they're like, what even is this? And here's this philosophical like objection or quandary, like what do you do as a pantheist then about valuing, where do you draw the line for certain things? So if a house is burning, you know, and there's a human child and a dog child or a chimpanzee child, let's say an endangered species, like one of the last white rhinoceroses in the house and a human child, which do you save? That kind of thing. So it's like, I know those cases, you never encounter them in real life, but it's like, how do you cash out living a morally differentiated, compassionate life as a pantheist. Because I think a lot of people, if they consider the idea of finding God or divinity in all things, it almost seems overwhelming conceptually. And as you say, it's like it's defined as an impossibility. I don't think it's contradictory at all, but it at least requires an account of how it's existentially possible. So those two sort of sides, if it's possible to weave those together, wonderful, but otherwise just choose which one you'd like to go with.
I think they can merge. We'll see where they do.
Nice.
I think, pantheism does seem absurd, especially in Western culture where the mind and body are split, nature and God are split, right? There is these kind of dualities that are wrapped up into everyday existence, even into the rhythms of culture, especially I feel like within the United States. And to me, when you think about pantheism, the pushback you get is, okay, if everything is God, then cancer is God. Or these evil people are God, right? Evil people would be definitely, you know what I mean? And, and I think the hard thing to maybe conceptualize for some folks is that I see God as like divinely neutral, substance as divinely neutral, and the concepts of good and evil as constructs that matter to societies and people. I'm very relativistic. If a different culture has a tradition of eating people after they die for whatever reason, that is not my place. That is their societal norm. That is considered good. That's not considered evil. So I think they're a good tool to recognize your own biases within yourself, good and evil, right? And to constantly be evaluating those and to not kind of fall under the assumption of norms. And I think pantheism, because it's so broad, right? When everything is God, what do you focus on? Because, you know what I mean? Like this pencil can be God, and that could be like a really wonderful experience. Be like, okay, I see the universe within this, right? I see substance within, I see God within this pencil, and then within myself, right? That's lovely. But then what do you do with like cancer or like white oppressive people? Like, what do you do? And I think since I've been at Yale, kind of how I've handled this ontologically, or like within my practice, has been that you can center any voices you want. And in pantheism, the voice of a pantheist has not been centered. It has been burned. It has been destroyed. The history is gone. And what voices, what perspectives are you uplifting? So, within the United States, uplifting Black voices, right? Uplifting queer voices, uplifting all these different folks who are experiencing marginalization because of the society and systems that we're in, which technically are parts of God's self, right? Societies would be included, institutions would be included. And I think what the movement factor for me is that pantheism is a vessel of constant change. There is nothing that exists exactly as it is in the next half a trillionth of a millisecond next. It is constant change, constant transformation. And, so God is not a static thing, right? It is constantly transforming. Transformation can be found in death, sure, birth, yes. But it's also found in like the loss of a job. It's found in like moving to a new place. It's found in like a flower growing for the first time or blooming, right? Or decaying, right? This whole life cycle process, the constant cycle movement and change of society as well, shows that it's possible that change can happen, And I think when you're centering the voices of the marginalized, you're uplifting the voices of God that have been oppressed for far too long. And the same thing with, societies. There is a possibility for change. And in Unitarian Universalism, a lot of it is about deeds, not creeds. There's not like a creedal nature for Unitarian Universalism. It's about the action we do, the justice work that we do. So it's bringing that slice of heaven to earth in one way or another. And that is kind of the pervasiveness of my pantheism, which I've kind of labeled as modal pantheism, rather than like focusing on like a monist view of like everything is God. That's great, but then like that doesn't account for the beautiful differences. It erases, you know, when you're focused just on everything being the same, you know, there's a constant transformation and changing, and it's the modes that are constantly changing infinitely. Infinite modes can exist, and in that way, I'm definitely a Spinozist, but that focus isn't on this like high oneness. That's great, but like practically day to day within chaplaincy, within my work, with educating, with spiritual direction, it is all within the mode. That's all I have access to as well. But focusing on change, possibilities, hope, not fixing anything, because people are going to naturally change as they want to. They're on their own path, and I'm there to be alongside them. So that is kind of how I function as a pantheist, is that it is constant modal change, all part of one. So God, nature, substance, universe, whatever you want to call it, is all one. And the thing is, like, maybe somebody could call me like an agnostic pantheist if they really wanted to, but my focus is not on the creator. I think what is always has been, you know, but it doesn't matter to me how I got here. I'm here. I'm existing now. So to go to your question of like, there's a white rhinoceros in the building. So then that's how much time. And like, I've been in crisis rooms. Like I've been in the trauma, like in the trauma base and different things. And like, I would say like, if I couldn't get out and get everyone out, then like, maybe it's just like sitting with the rhino while he burns alongside me. If I couldn't get him out in time and I couldn't get out, like, it's not like scrambling, like maybe pushing them out the door, but then like for what I can, like, let me burn with them. We're going to transform something new, I guess. I think that's what I would do. But like practically, who's closest to the door? Go, you know?
Sure.
But I think a lot of it is just existing, because change will happen, death will happen no matter what I do. And there's a lot of comfort in that for me. Yeah, so that's kind of my overall, I think, modal pantheist soapbox I can jump upon. But
no, I like it. It also has a Leibnizian spice to it, you know, with the monads. Yeah, thanks for laying that out. So we have a lot more to cover, and we'll do so. We'll take a quick break, and then we'll be back with more of Tasha Brownfield.
All right, thank you.
Tasha, how are you? How was your break? Are you refreshed?
Good. I got more coffee at almost 5 p.m. my time, so I think things are great.
Very good. I love that. I love to drink. I actually had a cup, I think around 6 tonight, because knowing that I was gonna stay up for this. So you can't always do that, but it's coffee's one of those nice pleasures, I suppose.
Yeah.
So let's dive back into our conversation. So why don't we pick it back up with queerness, identity, gender, and how that plays into your practice, your theory, your life, and your philosophy.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think when it was 2021 to 2022 when I was at Yale Divinity School. When I got accepted into Yale, I was applying to philosophy PhDs and Master of Divinity programs, and Yale was one to accept me and give me a scholarship, and it was unexpected. I applied to Harvard and Yale as a joke, and then I got in, and the rest was history. But when I was at Yale, I'm going to give some kind of background of myself there and kind of go into kind of where that led me on my journey into like queerness and to where I'm at now. So when I was at Yale, on my application materials, which you might have even read, Dave, honestly, you might have been one of the people to scan it over for me. Definitely mentioned I was a pantheist. I wasn't hiding it. It was well known that I was indeed a pantheist. And I got in with money. They gave me money, you know? So I expected some amount of...
Those proposal materials were well mentored, I'll tell you that. You know,
yes, they were.
Not just for myself, but you know, you came across well, but you really deserved the recognition that you got. You know, you're a very singular person, and you were then, and you are now. So, but yeah, continue. I interrupt. Yeah,
that's so funny. Yeah, when I was there, I expected some. I know I'm not the typical. I never have been. it's, you know, at Seton Hill I was embraced for difference though. Overall, you know, there was like maybe hard conversations, right? But there was always a level of acceptance and like, I want to know more about you, right? And try to help cater to my needs in any way that that any of those guys could. So at Yale Divinity School was not the case as much, especially for folks who fell out of the white mainline Protestant Christian group, which is very specific. So that wouldn't include like evangelical, Catholic, non-Christians, interfaith seekers. Didn't really feel like they had a place. And a very long story short, I noticed at Hull because I was asked to like plan an Earth Day service in the fall semester, and 3 weeks before it, in the springtime, I was told it was being canceled due to its non-Christian nature. Was the email I got? It was all Christian, minus Carl Sagan's Pale Blue Dot. All Christian music. It was like Wendell Berry. You know what I mean? It was like Christian theologians talking about nature, different types of Christianity. But that's what I kind of built. It wasn't exactly what I wanted it to be. I wish I could set on like Black voices more, Black indigenous ecology, right? But that wasn't there. But you know, and it was canceled due to its non-Christian nature. But the service was still used the same inside, but they replaced Sagan with a Psalms reading. So it wasn't necessarily the service that wasn't too non-Christian, but I was, right? And it'd be one thing if it was just me. And I always said this when I was there. I was like, if it was just me, like I could transfer. I'll be okay. I don't need Yale to be a pantheist. Like, I'm okay. But I mean, it was such a high percentage of that student population and even faculty were experiencing like that tension of identity, institutional identity, and what's accepted and what's not. And so I ran with it, and you know, what did I do with that? Did I fight to go back in the chapel? Did I just let it go? I said, no, I wanted to come here and meet this place with love. Like that was the initial goal of this. So I just did a service outside. As soon as that service was over, people could filter down into mine. That I did, and I started a club called ABC, Anything But Christian, which was taken lovely, as you might imagine, with the sarcasm.
Yes.
But I continued to look down on it because I was like, this is needed. So students I would have like book spaces for satyrs. I would book places for like meditations or like have a fire pit because I was like a student org. And so I took the brunt of it for the 2 years I was there in person because I was at COVID for the first year online and then 2 years in person. So when I was there, that was kind of the culture that I was like wrestling up against. Was a lot of tension, and you know, the deans of the divinity school, different people in leadership, professors, were pretty split on the Tasha Brownfield scandal, the satanic panic of Yale. Because
which received quite a bit of press at the time, I recall. You know, like
it did receive
opening my breakfast paper. You know what I mean, with my orange juice in one hand. You know, and you know, but it was,
here I am. So, very Googleable. What a thing.
But I think you handled it with grace. You know, you did. You turned the other cheek. You don't harbor any resentments. You know, it is. You took it in stride and went with the flow of things. You know, and it's like you turn negativity into positivity. And I think, you know, I don't know if you feel that, you know, about it, that it's that clear cut, or if you still, you know, just also, you know, it's like, I'm sorry that you went through that. That sounds just an intensely, I mean, it's not just you say that's a pretty common experience. And I can relate to that to a certain degree with my experience in academia, and just kind of another story, but that, you know, it does happen in these spaces where you might not expect it to. But nonetheless, you got out of Yale, and you had your experience there, and that shaped who you were. And then what did you do with that?
Yeah, when I was kind of still there somewhat, a dear friend, his name is Kevin Marsh, and drag queen name is Christian Church. And Christian Church wanted to throw a Divinity of Drag show at the school. And short knowledge, there wasn't a drag show prior to that at the divinity school. Also faced some backlash of like, is it allowed in the chapel? It wasn't allowed in the chapel due to sacred space. So we did wrestle with some things of queerness as well. But they, Christy in church needed more performers. So I was asked to perform, and I was like, I lack shame and I'm fine with being on stage and doing whatever. So I started performing in drag when I was a student at Yale. And because like that kind of context I was giving you on what Yale was like, my drag persona was born from that time, because I was wrestling with pantheism. What does it mean to hold multiple things that aren't supposed to go together? The dichotomies that I was holding, right? Of sacred and profane, or, like things that to me aren't separate at all, but to a lot of other people they are. So that's what when I was asked to do that, I'm queer overall in my life. And so when I was asked to do this, I decided to come up with the name Reverend Morningstar. And Morningstar in the Bible is both the coming of Jesus and the coming of Satan. So while I was being told by administration that I was conjuring evil spirits, and then the students saying, no, you're like walking in the footsteps of Jesus, I was at that dichotomy, right? These like constant pulls of like, where am I at and what am I doing? So I said, all right, you think I'm the devil, I'll be Morningstar. So I dressed as a fallen angel and I performed and like queer testimony. And I did that 4 times at Yale. So while all this was happening, that was like my creative outlet to like process what was happening and to have something like a storytelling that felt impactful for me and for the community. But it stuck. And so then after, performing around Connecticut, I took it back home to Pittsburgh. And then when I got here, I started performing. So since really, I guess like October 2023 was the first time I performed in Baltimore, but it's, started to take off. And I think Reverend Morningstar, the character kind of that I built, that's definitely a reverend in nature as well, has entered into queer space and around DC, Baltimore, Connecticut, and now Philadelphia coming up too. So also very unexpected twisted events. But, I'm holding a minister identity, right? That's tends to be more conservative in nature. Not typically also like young women aren't really at that focus there either. So now the fact that like I'm a drag performer that, does push boundaries. I'm like purposely provocative, politically, sexually, right? In my presentation. But I dress up as like a full king, beard, everything. And it's like such a joy. But it definitely collapses those binaries that I see as like false in, their substance as much as they're just a forever fluid thing. And I can mash them all together. And like, that is God's self, and that's okay. So it was born out of that time at Yale, which is why I gave that kind of longish backstory on.
No, that's like the origin story of Reverend Morningstar. Like every like hero, like figure, it reminds me, it's like a Bowie character. Like I've been listening to a lot of Bowie these last years or whatnot. And, it's just like born out of like a context, like a persona that isn't necessarily fully sympathetic, but it's like, it's not about that. It's kind of like rising to the moment and like what is conjured on that occasion. And then, like allowing that to express itself. So, but one question that was just like, I have to ask this, because like, when you said Reverend Morningstar, I actually first thought of like the medieval weapon. So does your Reverend Morningstar character also hold like a morning star, like a little, devilish, cartoonish one?
I wish. It's in one of my like first posts on my like performer Instagram page, I like put the definition of Morningstar, and it was like, 1, in the Christian tradition refers to both Jesus and Satan. 2, the light of Venus. Venus is the morning star, which is also probably what the 3 kings probably followed if you're Christian. So, and it's also like this feminine energy of Venus, which is also very witchy, but it also is like claimed by the Christian tradition. It's like also, and then the morning star of the weapon. And I have that in like one of my first posts, is like the definition of Morningstar. And I think it's also really funny. When I picked the name, it was because of that. And when I went on a departmental retreat thing for Johns Hopkins, we were talking about like the etymology of our name before we were given our names. And I realized Tasha means the coming of the Lord. And Morningstar also means the coming of the Lord. So my birth name and my performer name mean the same thing, but Morningstar is a little bit more spicy. So,
yes.
But yeah, it's also very strange the way that names come.
No kidding. I mean, that's like, it couldn't get more apropos than that. You know, it's like things coming full circle. Like, is that, do you believe, okay, here's like a question, like, what do you do with like the concept of coincidence or non-coincidence or something? It's like, you know, like, or do you even reject these concepts? So like, are things like that, is this purely coincidental, or is it the case that there's some sort of intelligible pattern that connects these things? Is there another way to put this, and I meant to ask this last segment, but it's like, are you, as a pantheist, then do you see yourself as like a teleologically driven pantheist? That is to say, like, will the future, in your view, either like get better or maybe get worse, or is it kind of, it'll just continue to be what it is and it's not a matter of better or worse? But like, you know, because I think that's another thing that just like drives politics today, that drives identity, probably, that, you know, that like drives the interest that people have in religion, and maybe like the resurgence of religion among the young today, which I think we should also talk about. But so yeah, how do you handle that?
Yeah, in regards to coincidence, I would err more towards that, right? I would err more towards coincidences, and in some ways, to me, like, by coincidence, you know, all these like different like butterfly effects, these like little things that keep happening, right? By coincidence, I've gotten here, and to me, it is awe-inspiring the fact that these coincidences happen, because I think it's less about the function, like the root of that, but rather like its function and what it shows you about yourself. So like when a coincidence comes up, like what is that showing about a truth in yourself, within your community, within your society, nation, world, right? Like it allows you to see a pattern within your own life, which is very true. But I think it's subjective to every single person in society, right? But I think as those things happen, it's something to like note, to be like, this is a part of my story. And the fact that I somehow chose my name, you know, the same etymological meaning of these two is strange. And I'm like, what does that say about me? Like, that's fascinating. Like, it allows me to think more about myself rather than it was nature had its hand in it. But maybe it did. Maybe that's the agnostic pantheist in me. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. Nice. You know, that when it comes to change, and if I can see like if it's stagnant or if it's hope, despair, you know, all these different things, I think it's a mix of both. And I think it depends on what world you're centering in on. Like maybe my world gets better, but like, are my Black trans women friends and colleagues world getting better? It'll probably get worse, you know? And then like, what is my role in that when I have the strength, the voice, this career, the pulpit, right? All these different things have now been placed in my hand at 27. And then whose voice am I centering? Whose world is getting better? Yeah, I can care less, honestly. If my world gets better, I will die and I will be okay. You know, but while other people are living here, how do you show up for community? And I think that's what drag is. That's what chaplaincy is. That's what my community is, because I'm trying to live a life in service to the people around me the best that I can. I don't have the monies as is the 9 years of schooling and a chaplain salary to like give reparations back or to like really help in monetary value. But like, I will show up and I will drop off food. Like, we will figure this out together. So I think a lot of communal support, and I think that's very much needed in the United States today, as to like, is change possible? It maybe like pantheism, it becomes overwhelming to think of everything as God, or everything must change for there be something. It's like where to even start? And I think that's a lot of Trump's strategy, is to pull us out as Americans, to say like, there is no control, but there is control. There is a way for change. And that is my ontological view as a modal pantheist, that I am functioning under the assumption that things can and will change, and better or worse is subjective based on the person. And I think to center those voices that are the most marginalized within my specific community, how can I help you? How can I show up for you? Is that promoting your show? Is that helping try to find other people to help with utilities this month? Is that someone to listen to? You want someone to help you move? You want someone to sit with you while you're working? Do you not want to be alone? It is in my own individual actions in which the world can change, and assuming something will change just based on a policy getting changed or a certain vote is fine, but it's not going to impact the people that are struggling right now. So I think that's kind of how I function in my pantheism and in my queerness and in my drag, right? It is like showing up in the immediate. Can I do, and how can I continue to show up?
Yes. Wonderful. Yeah. I really enjoy how you put that, and like, appearing in the world. And what you describe here is also things that, there's like an in-person element, right? Like principally like when performing in drag, you perform for people in person, live, like a living connection of community building, and similar with chaplaincy. But it's also, you exist as like a figure in the social media world and in communicating with people and what you represent, and you can sign forms to make things happen or draw attention to certain things. And, what you choose to spend your time on then gets, you can elevate, and you have a platform. So it's really quite, really, really special. But let me like twist this a little bit here with a quick follow-up. So about maybe, this, I'll put it in like a, technical way a little bit with like normativity. Like, where does because it seems you are committed to justice, right? Like at least what you describe, or here's the question, like, are you committed to justice? Because, it seems that in addition to, recognizing a divinity being pan, you also have a sort of connection to suffering and to helping out those who are marginalized. Like, where does that come from? Because you can imagine someone who is pantheist, and maybe, I don't know if this is even exists, but at least let's imagine someone who is pantheist in the sense that they see everything as divine, but they aren't moved to help the meek among us, and they kind of just accept suffering and allow it a certain degree of exploitation and misery to be. And in some ways, Aristotle brought him up before, like, kind of had that too, because in his view, nature is hierarchical and human society is natural, and it also has hierarchies, and there's some people who are naturally slaves, and some people who are meant to govern, and some people who are not, and so on. And so it's like, but in your case, maybe it's like a democratic impulse or a goodness, like if you see what I'm getting at here, it's like, what then makes it so that then you live your life and you also feel driven or motivated or justified or like morally compelled to, and you've made enormous sacrifices, and you've stood up, as you said, like you've been there, you've shown up and at risk to yourself as well. And so it's like, what drives you to make those risks, to take those drastic actions? It's like, is there some sort of impulse of justice or goodness or ethics that's also there in your pantheism? And maybe this is also a question about nihilism, like, because certainly the case online, like if you just Google or if you're looking on YouTube about like interests that people have in philosophy, a lot of people are interested in like nihilism and certain misreadings of Nietzsche. And I think like they're attracted to the idea that maybe like nothing matters. And to say that everything is divine is kind of like saying that nothing is divine, and then just accept, and then there's no normativity. There's no reason to try to improve the world or to help others at all. It's just leave it be, I mean, that's introduced in like Dostoevsky and things, but I don't think that's your version of pantheism at all. So it's like, where does that come out for you?
Yeah. I think that point that you made on, for a pantheist, if everything is divine, then it's like, then does nothing matter, right? That kind of like pull through. And that's what has been, I don't know what's the right word, like argue against pantheism, right? Why it's an absurdity, right? Because it has that contradiction. But for me, it's not necessarily written about, and why I kind of claim modal pantheism rather than like a monistic view, right? It's not like an all, that's not my focus. Creator's not the focus. The oneness is not the focus. And I think because of my chaplaincy training, my education, and everything that I have kind of built for me is that, because again, not written, this is just me, but if I am, my like base understanding of justice is to reduce suffering. Suffering is real. I don't necessarily think happiness is the ideal either, to be fair. I think freedom is subjective, but I think life can be broad, including like a river for me. Life can undergo transformation that is unnecessary and harmful for the gain of others. And it's, when you look at it from like a macro view of like nationalism, right, or societal change, there are justice things that need to happen, and it's really hard to center everyone, even just the marginalized, right? And that's what the states are going through. In my perspective. So for me as a pantheist, I recognize that suffering is divinely neutral. Just as sex is divinely neutral, just as all these different concepts, good, evil, pleasure, suffering, all are equally God. And in Western society, in this culture, in the communities I'm in, I can listen to directly, what are the hardships in your life? How can I show up for you? Is that standing beside you? Is that making a change? Is that showing up at Yale and standing in the front and taking the brunt for a third of the student population that went underneath my organization within under a year? Is it that type of change that's needed? Is that what I'm assessing? Is that what I'm hearing needs to be done? It will get done. If it is just sitting with my my friend and in my ordination, David von Schlitten from Seton Hill, who's the current dean of the humanities, and his sermon at my ordination was, who's going to hold the hand of their of his friend that's trans, whose hands are shaking, who went to the doctor scared that, maybe they had a neurological problem, maybe they had a seizure. And it was just the stress of living as a trans person in the United States, and Dave's called me, which was very apt. And to, how I see myself is that I will show up, I will hold your hand, I will listen. And I think for me as a pantheist, I want to get to know God more. I want to know substance more. I want to know nature more. Am I like hanging out with an ant while like the ant is dying? Yes, I've done it, right? Have I done these things like for like the smallest? I will show up continually, but it's individual and communal base. Like I can try to center the whole world, but like change doesn't happen unless it's like right in front of you. And I could sign policies and papers, like, right, I'm getting more privilege and access to make larger changes. But my primary thing is to show up for someone. And it doesn't necessarily mean to show up in the face of suffering, to reducing suffering. And that suffering is subjective based on the person I'm with. And it's showing up for people who define suffering as different than me. In my job, I'm not only just seeing, in my chaplain job, I'm seeing people who are conservative, who voted for Trump. That's not my place to say one way or the other. How am I showing up for them? What suffering are they facing? What fears are they facing? Their fears and their emotions are real. How do I validate? How do I understand? How do I have empathy? So I have a lot of empathy for Yale, for example, as like an oppressive institution, right? Was the way it functioned in my life. But they were struggling with identity, right? They're worried about all these different facets in which I want to understand you. I want to know how I can show up for you, because if I don't understand you, then I can make no change anywhere. So I would listened as much as I could to every person in leadership at Yale. So I don't know if it's to reduce suffering, surrounded by suffering. And what does that person need? Is it to sit in suffering? Is it to reduce it? Is it to fight for it? And that is up to me listening. And it's not me assuming, especially with my privilege as a white woman in the States that's young. You know, like, I don't want to just assume what people need. I don't need to be like, I'm your friend, I'm showing up for you. And now, like, you need help, friend? Like, what do you need? It's communal. It's friendship to me. That's why I see the ants, rivers, trees, the folks around me. I don't know if that made sense or not.
No, totally. I really appreciate that. You know, it's just, it's like, it's hard to explain, and it's, you know, but so that's like on the practical and on the theoretical. And I think that's like quite well fleshed out. And let me ask you a more sociological question to kind of move us towards a close here. Then I have a question about recommendations for you. So my sociological question, this is kind of like my journalist hat on, is that there was like a Pew Research poll just released a couple of days ago about like religiosity in America, and that found that younger people, like Gen Z and younger, are more religious in terms of their, like, the drainage from various forms, usually of Protestant evangelical Christianity, towards nuns has sort of stopped with Gen Z, and that it anecdotally looks like there's a lot of interest, maybe post-COVID and things, amongst younger people to form community. You know, I don't know if how you would explain that. So that's my question, like, from your bird's eye view and your unique perspective as like I don't know if you are, do you consider yourself Gen Z? Are you Gen Z?
Gen's 1998. How I functionalize it is I remember 9/11 vividly, but I don't remember a functional world before. So that in between, for like you, if you're placing yourself in like United States generational, you know, Gen Z would not remember 9/11, but millennials would remember a world functionally before, even if it's like in preschool or something, right? But I was born in 1998. So it's like a
liminal, you're liminal generationally.
Yeah. Okay. And I was raised in a lower socioeconomic status. So like I didn't have the internet in my house. A lot of my like references and like VHS tapes. Like, so I was raised towards millennial, like socioeconomically and like with my other people. But all that said, in the middle.
Sure. But do you agree with that thesis? Like what is going on for you in that data? So the data just reports that, and this is the US, and this is based on demographic surveys and things, but it seemed to be quite reliable, that Gen Z and younger are more religiously, they identify in a religious category more so, and it looks like there's a sort of resurgence of interest in religion. And, you know, you as a pantheist minister, reverend, chaplain, and as somebody in your age group, you know, like, what do you see with this? And maybe even in your home parish, you know, your church.
I feel like a lot of folks in my generation are seeking for something. A lot of folks who are queer, who are evangelical, or white Christian nationalist fundamentalist, right? Even women who like realize they have a call to ministry and then they can't do it, right? There's a lot of places in which people have fallen away from religion because of their experiences as a child, including sexual trauma, right? All these different things that happen within religious spaces. When you have religious trauma, then how do you reincorporate? So sometimes, you know, religiosity might be like a coven. It might be, you know, a church. There is a huge resurgence. I forget what study was just out, but I just read that among like young white American men, the amount of evangelicalism on the rise, like the under 30. But it's also how Trump got elected was what was through this, right? So there is a big resurgence there. I think that's a whole
and you wonder thing. It's like, is it correspondence or causality? You know, is this like a shadow thing? It's mostly just young men becoming red-pilled and becoming Trumpian, and part of that, what goes along with that is, you know, converting the Catholicism like J.D. Vance, or, you know, having some, you know, like more committed traditional family values like religious identity.
Yeah, and I think it's the epidemic of like loneliness. Like I was lucky to be raised without the internet in my hands. Like I remember a functional world before the internet in my hands. Also, why I'm in the middle, right? You know, so I didn't like functionally exist on the internet until I was 14 or so, and I wasn't reliant on it for social engagement, for community, and especially in COVID. Like that's all we had, and I was lucky to be a Christian. I was, because at least I had some experience on like what myself. So I think it's like on the epidemic of loneliness and like what does it mean to show up for one another. And I took a wonderful class with Dr. Melanie Ross at Yale, who was the only evangelical professor and like my best friend. We were two outs, opposites almost in a way, but she was advocate. She's lovely, and I took her class on American evangelicalism, and you know there's a heavy resurgence in it, and a lot of folks who are especially like evangelical who don't have access to resources. Let's say like West Virginia. I was raised towards that West Virginia line in Pennsylvania. You know, the government hasn't provided for you ever in your family, like living memory. So you know you have to show up for each other, and a lot of that has function around the church. So like some people maybe don't theologically maybe even believe the same, but they wouldn't question it because like that's how they're getting not even just like socialization, but how they're getting like food if they need a ride to the doctor. Like your church is showing up for you, and I think evangelical communities do a great job in that. And I'm actually like caring about the other person and showing up, and like in their view, it's like walking like a monastic view. Like every step you're like walking with God, or like you're dating Jesus. It's another like evangelical notion of like it's a constant everyday relationship, and that includes your relationship to others. So there's also a big rise in rural areas.
Well, some would say it's like a constant like panopticon, like always being surveyed and judged every second, you know, and but it depends on how you look at it, I guess, you
know. True. So I think it is on the rise amongst both liberal crowds, conservative, across the U.S. I think it has to do with loneliness, and I think the evangelicals are showing up the best for each other, not necessarily for the rest of the world, but in the way that they are functioning with one another is something that a lot of liberal denominations have not been able to do. I think my church is very small, so I'm very grateful that they can show up for each other, provide rides, you know, all that kind of thing. But it is about, just like I said before, it's about showing up individually with one another, rather than like a greater change. And I think a lot of people are finding that in religion, support and to support others, to have purpose, to feel like there's meaning in this world. When especially COVID's, I think, spiked so much interest in nihilism, like you said too.
So, okay, Tasha, then time as usual for my last question, which is just, do you have any recommendations to share with those watching and listening? And for those watching, yes, this is a Smurfs glass that I'm drinking my sparkling water out of. Book, album, or film, mix and match, your choice. So
a little bit of a mix and match. So first is a book called The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa, who it was recently translated. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
It was just translated into English. It's written by a Japanese author. It was, I forget, I would have to look up the year, which I should know this since I was recommending it, but it was translated not that long ago. I think within maybe 2019 or 2021 is when it was translated and published, but it became a bestseller, won a bunch of awards in the US, but not like best selling as like most sold. It was like very niche. I would put it in the genre of horror to folktale. Nice. You know, the genre is heavily debated amongst readers on like, what is the meaning of this? I think that book was, I read it for a random book club for a comic bookstore here in Baltimore called Atomic Books, and they had this book. I would never have picked this thing up, and it's about kind of constant change, loss, grief, and like the overall, I don't know, without spoiling things, it is it's about things disappearing. So kind of in the beginning.
What's the setting? Is it contemporary setting or more of a historical setting or ambiguous?
Ambiguous. There's cars, but it's like lacking some technology. It's like hard to really place, but post-industrial revolution, because there's vehicles and motorized boats, I would say. Okay. But not like today either, and not like futuristic. But it's on things disappearing. So to like have one example, one day the birds disappear, and at first you don't really notice it, and then you like notice there's like no birds in the sky, and it keeps kind of going through different things that disappear through these people's worlds, and the pushback from the government's a little bit of like 1984 vibes, little Orwell vibes. It's like a lot of interesting,
trying to convince people, like gaslight people into not thinking that the things weren't there to begin with and stuff, or
things of that similar nature. But it gets to very like dark horror folk films. But I think that made me think a lot about loss and transmutation and constant change, like in like that modal pantheism spiel too, of like everything is a constant change, and what is remembering, and like is remembering like a resurgence, is it fault, you know? So I think it brings up a lot of interesting concepts with philosophy, and just like existential thought. So I think that is a great one to read, and it has a lovely audiobook. I listened to the audiobook on my many drives to Pittsburgh and Baltimore and back. So
yeah, sure.
Yeah, so that's recommendation number 1.
Excellent. I mean, it's hard to top that. But yeah, I'm curious what you got next.
Okay. Next one is a newer kind of breakthrough artist in the last few years called Jesse Wells. Are you familiar?
I've heard the name, yes.
Artist that has come to be. He has a new album put out called Under the Power Lines. I've seen him in concert every time I could. I think especially for the international audience that could be watching, I think he wrote a song on current events every single day, and he posted it on Instagram, TikTok, you know, and they went viral. He has a song called like Cancer, that talks about, I think it's a phenomenal song for the work that I do. War is a Murder that's one of his biggest songs too, but he has like
that's the one I've seen.
Yeah, there's like over 62 songs in this, because he wrote almost a song every single day, and he published a whole thing. He sung it under the power lines. So there's like birds chirping in the background, but he gives it like snippet by snippet. Like the debate between Biden and Trump, there's like a song about that. There's a song about like current events in America that's like put to music, and very like anti-capitalism, anti-1%. And it's like humorous and brilliant. And he's like one of the best writers, poets, and musicians, I think, of a generation. And
he's still producing material now.
Oh yeah, so every day. There was something he just posted recently. Like when I took a little break, I saw he posted another thing. Like every day, you know, he's just constantly, and all of his shows sold out in the States within like 7 minutes. I got tickets for New York City. That's the only place I could go. But he like, he is, I think, especially for the international audience, to like really get a look into what is on the ground America feel and look like for folks that aren't like famous. It's Jesse Wells.
And he's based in Appalachia, right? Or am I wrong about where he's based?
Yeah, he was raised in like southern Appalachia, in DuPont, Alabama, I think is one of his songs. But he's like from like the South. And he was the lead singer of like a metal band called Just Wells, Wells. And so he was like a hardcore rock singer. Then I think that band fell apart within COVID. And then he was publishing on his own. He was just singing folk songs in the power lines. He went viral. And now I think, because he's just taking off, like it's just starting, and he's the best capsule of what is it like to live in America right now for the average person.
Yes. So and so that it seems then that he can and probably will have more and more kind of impact and influence and a sort of mirroring effect upon American culture himself. Like phenomenon like that arise for a reason and resonate for a reason, right? And so that says something about the direction that the country is going and the world.
Yeah. Jesse's a once in a generation artist, though. Like he is phenomenal. So highly suggest Under the Power Lines, that's just like his like total capsule of all of his songs for the year. But he has many albums, many songs released. So
fantastic. Yeah. Excellent. Thanks very much. Well, and then last but not least, right? Or I don't know if it's hard to top both of those names.
I already gave the snippet for Mary Jane Rubenstein's God, Worlds, and Monsters, Pantheology, so I suggest that one, but since I already talked about that one at like a decent amount, I'll give another one that is, it's called When They Call You a Terrorist, a Black Lives Matter memoir by Patrice Kahn-Kollers and Asha Bandles, with a foreword by Angela Davis. I think I read this for a course at Yale, and I think it also talks about that kind of intersection of how it does talk about pantheism specifically, but I think like mapping on pantheism to this is kind of going off of Grace Janssen's work, the feminist theologian that I brought up earlier, on what does it look like to actively show up in community that is constantly changing, to like leave behind assumptive narratives of norms, and like what does it mean to listen. The foreword by Angela Davis is short and it's lovely and a phenomenal writer. But the whole book is also a really good capsule on time capsule for America, and what does it mean to be a Black person living in America.
Okay.
And
so and that was written in the wake of George Floyd, and correct. Like in 2020 or 2021, or is it more recent? Just to kind of track, it's just so crazy to think of like what has transpired in 5 years, right?
It was. The book was being written before COVID into George Floyd. Angela Davis wrote her foreword that kind of was like, this is in a pandemic, now it's getting published. So it feels like some of the book, it was written in that liminal time that was normal for society before COVID into after. And also the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, right? So I think Angela Davis's foreword, I think, has that in mind, but the rest of it doesn't. So it's interesting to see it kind of like join together in it. That's also why I think I suggested too. I think it's wonderful to read, but if you're trying to start on, a journey of like understanding racism, or anything, that's a very accessible read that I highly suggest. And something that's like a little bit more deeper than that, but focuses on like Black women specifically, what Black women's experience in the United States is, such as in the wilderness. Is another great one. I don't know if you've heard of that, Dave, but
no, that one I've not heard of.
Sisters in the Wilderness is by Denise Williams, who's a Black theologian, Christian based, but there's lots to learn from her as well. I think those two are kind of like a good mix. That one's a lot harder, very dense to read, but When They Call You a Terrorist, Black Lives Matter memoir, it's very accessible and very eye-opening for probably a lot of folks within America to read and internationally.
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry,
and
I was talking four.
No. I mean, those last two were coupled together. And I really love that idea of the time capsule and of reflecting and of taking on different experiences. Thank you. So then, any last words, Tasha, before we leave our guests to the side and go about our lives?
I don't think so. That's it. I really appreciate being here, like I said, and anytime I can talk about pantheism, it's always a treat because I don't get to talk about it often. So I'll always enjoy it. It's great. It's great to see you and spend time with you too. It's been a while, so it's wonderful. So thank you.
Yeah, the pleasure's mine. Thanks for being here, and we can chat again in the future and dig even further into pantheism. Thank you so much, Tasha, and we'll see you soon. And then everybody else, we'll see you for the next episode of the Deadbeat Philosophy Podcast. Bye-bye. Bye. We hope you enjoyed this conversation with
Tasha Brownfield.
The Deadbeat Philosophy Podcast is a co-production of Deadbeat Media and the Museum Hegel-Haus Stuttgart. For more Deadbeat content and to chip in to keep the channel going, check us out at deadbeatphilosophy.substack.com. For more about the Museum Hegel-Haus, check out hegelhaus.de. That's HEGEL-HAUS.de. Adios and auf Wiedersehen.